Welcome back to another episode of Forbidden Depths. I'm your host, Queen Frostbitten, and we're here today to get down, dirty, and sultry by staying open, educated, consensual, and safe. If you're returning, welcome back to another episode. Thanks for supporting the channel and its growth. If, of course, you're new here, make sure you follow, like, and subscribe, because one taste will never be enough. Welcome back to another episode of Forbidden Depths. Today we're going to have, I think it's actually more normal than people think. Today we're going to talk about fetish. We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff when it comes to like decisions that you make throughout your life, kind of why you make those decisions. So thanks for the next episode. Today we have Thanatos, my very, very good boy. And we're going to talk to him about some stuff that's went on with him throughout the years. So first of all, I'm going to let him introduce himself with what he's attracted to. Tell us what you're attracted to.
Okay. Well, I am Thanatos, the name you gave me, which I love very much. So I have had the pleasure of being your very first podcast guest.
Yes.
And so that one's there, and that talks about my smoking fetish, which started at the age of 4, and we went pretty in depth on that. We may touch on that a little bit today, but if people want to go back and look, they can see that. And so currently I'm 53, and I've been, serving you since this past summer. And so my attraction, besides the smoking fetish, I'm attracted to, dominant women, and that which led me to you. And so I think we're going to get into that and some other stuff related to my sexual past, history, and lack thereof, maybe.
Yeah, well, everybody does stuff in their own time, right? So first I want to tell you guys that there's been several studies done throughout the years to say kind of where people start getting like sexually active. Usually people that develop earlier start becoming active earlier, right? So like the girls, the females that kind of develop at a younger age, it has proven scientifically that those people start becoming sexually active earlier, right? So I didn't actually start developing like boobs and like a female kind of feminine figure until it was my 8th grade year. And that's also whenever I started wearing like girly kind of shit sometimes, not like all the time. But my point is, I wasn't interested in like other people. Like, yeah, the whole dating, like, whenever 2 kids are together, like, oh, you're my boyfriend, you're my girlfriend, whatever, maybe kissing and shit, but not like being willfully active sexually. I didn't start doing that shit until I was 17. So I had never, other than, being raped and molested and shit, I had never been active willfully until I was 17 years old. Okay. So everybody does it at different ages. So we're going to kind of talk about kind of how you developed your taste for it, Thanatos. Tell us about kind of how your sexual urges started and kind of how old you were whenever you happened into your sexual life.
So I would say that, typical sexual urges were maybe not even something I experience today in a normal sense, in the vanilla sense, right? Of seeing someone and being attracted to them and wanting to have sex with them. That's not really a motivator for me. So my fetish started at 4. And so while at 4 you don't have a concept of sex, right, there are urges, and certainly urges that you don't understand at that age. And so I started masturbating at a very young age. And so by the time I reached, adolescence, puberty, where people were traditionally getting that, I already had a well-established pattern. And that's obviously a very solo activity. So while not that I didn't find girls attractive, I did, but probably from a different sense. And so I never really, I never through high school, I never dated anyone. I never, and I was really uncomfortable with that. Really, I was even
Mm,
uncomfortable when, girls would flirt. I was super uncomfortable with that. Like I just
mm,
wasn't, Um, so it really wasn't until I was like probably like a senior in high school that I actually started, going on an actual date with someone, and that was
right.
older women because I initially was more attracted to older women.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so that would have been the case. And then, I never dated off and on, nothing real serious. I had a pretty serious relationship um, in the early part of the 2000s. So I was in my 30s, and
Right.
then that didn't work. And when it ended, I didn't date for another 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got involved in a pretty serious relationship there. We were in a serious relationship for about 2.5 years, and then that's the one that actually became sexual.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first actual sexual intercourse was at 44 years of age.
Yes, yes. So that was very, very interesting for me too. So we kind of have some similarities whenever we talk about the development of urges younger. So me, I started getting urges younger too, but part of that was because of the abuse that I suffered, right? So I started masturbating knowing what I was doing when I was 8. Before that, it was just kind of like figuring yourself out by accident, you know? And then whenever I was 8, that's whenever I started having my own urges. And it kind of goes along with what you were saying about the solo act, and you get in the pattern of it, and then that's kind of how you do it. You don't need someone else. You got all this that you just take care of completely on your own. And I think because I did all that on my own, because I was so self-sufficient and I didn't need someone else to like satisfy me in that realm, that I wasn't sexually attracted to people physically like that until I was around 17 years old. So I know you said that you had started dating actually around your senior year in high school. So that kind of goes with that as well. So I'm seeing a lot of like links. So I know you were talking about being attracted to older women. We also talked about that kind of in the first interview that we had. So with you being attracted to older women, do you think that ties in a lot to your fetish and your past experiences?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think where the older women came in because again, I was, attracted to the smoking. And of course, when you're a
Mm,
child, your peer group, whatever, doesn't um, you know, do that. So
right.
I think the idea of an older woman smoking, the maybe the authoritarian aspect of it, all of that was attractive, right?
Hmm.
Um, it was kind of and I mentioned that in the first interview, it was kind of an odd scenario where, when it was first, it was older women, then it was older women, and then my peer group, and then it became older women, my peer group, and younger, and now
Right.
primarily, the fetish focuses almost all exclusively on younger than me, So,
Right.
but I think it definitely, yes, it influenced that, and the types of women that I was attracted to,
Right.
a little bit of the bad girl sort, I guess, if you will,
Hmm.
which
Right.
is ironic because I'm anything but, right? So,
Yeah, like the social deviant almost.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And it is so fucking true. Like you are like textbook, like following orders, the good boy, like and then
yeah,
you like the little darker side. That's how you
exactly, yeah,
found me.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
So, um, I know that we've talked quite a bit about your smoking fetish. So, kind of what else makes you attracted to someone? I know that it's not really the physical attributes, like we're not talking about titties and ass and shit like that. Like, yes, I mean, that can be associated somehow, but like what else makes you drawn to someone?
Yeah, it's funny, so we had kind of had a little bit of a chat on this not very recently, right? And I said, well, I don't
Mhm.
have a type. And then you had said some things that made me question that, right? So,
Yeah.
I think about type in terms of the social constraint of looks, right? Tall,
Right.
short, skinny, fat, blonde
Hmm.
hair, red hair, whatever. And certainly we all know people like that. Like I know someone that,
Oh yeah.
a friend of mine told me that his stepdaughter broke up with her boyfriend. I'm over at his house and she's there with this guy and there's like, I thought you said they broke up, and you said she did break up with him. And I'm like, well, who's that? And he goes, well, that's Aaron. I'm like, he looks exactly like the last guy. He goes, I know. I'm like, so she clearly had a type, right? So I don't have that. So but in thinking about it, yeah, I have a type, right? So for me it's attitude, right?
Right.
To me, attitude is the most attractive attribute. So it's and so certainly I love um confident, in control women. I love that. I'm attracted to that. And so I think that's a big part of it.
Hmm.
I am exclusively attracted to females, not males, but I
Right.
suppose I like a little bit of maybe a masculine energy in the females.
Right.
Um, so it's more that than, like I said, a particular body type or any particular attribute. It's more that, and so it's a little more eclectic, I guess, a little harder to nail
Yeah.
down. And of course, obviously there's the smoking aspect. Funny thing with that, and I think I talked about this, I could see a female that I'm like, not, if I'm really not attractive, find her attractive in any way. If she smokes, doesn't necessarily suddenly make her attractive. But a female that's sort of like borderline, like I'm kind
Hmm.
of on it, and then she smokes, especially in a way that I like, that can push her to the like category. But I've also had females that I thought, oh, she's really attractive, and find out she smokes, and then like, oh, I don't really like the way she smokes. So and then it knocks her down a peg, right? It knocks her
Yeah.
down. It's really really funny how that works. But yeah, so I think like I said, that's kind of my where I'm attracted. I guess I always have been, if I think
Right.
about things, right?
So that kind of makes me feel like, with the amount of information that I have, that you ride this fine line between being a fetishist that is either some form of asexual or demisexual. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. I would say I'm asexual, right? Because um, I'm not seeking sexual relationships, right?
Right.
And when I did have it, I mean, it was okay in some aspects, but it's not something that I'm really overly trying to engage in.
Hmm.
So I would say more so asexual, but I mean, and there's different realms of asexual, right? And I've only
Hmm.
in the last few years really, I think it's something that's been around a long time, but I think it's something that's still, and I think as people are very accepting of different, polyamorous and all the different things, and people being, gay or bisexual.
Hmm.
I think asexual is still really misunderstood
Oh yes.
by a lot of people, and I think and I think it's because it's such a small section, right? It's so small.
Well, I think
Um,
it's one of those things where people automatically assume that you have this drive like other people. And if it's different, they don't understand it. So they don't talk about it. It's one of those things that they try to kind of compartmentalize and say, oh, well, there's some kind of shame associated with this. And there's fucking not. But I know there are plenty of men and women alike and non-binary people that just don't have that same drive as everybody else, kind of like you were talking about. um I feel like a lot of yours is, you need to be attracted to somebody's mind. Like, if you find somebody like halfway attractive and they're not an intelligent person, you're just like, yeah, that's a no-go, completely no-go. I'm gone.
it's funny you say that because there's a woman who I won't name her, but she's got a Twitter and she's got some of the socials, and she does different things, but she's also does some smoking fetish stuff. And
Mhm.
I, from a smoking fetish side, I like her, but I've
Right.
watched a couple of her lives and I'm like, oh my God, this woman has nothing going on. Like, it's a good thing she's pretty, because I don't think she'd hold a regular job. I mean, she just doesn't. And so I can only watch a little bit of her because it just
Right.
gets on my nerves. But yeah, I mean, I think that's very true in some level. I mean, yeah, I'm not looking for I mean, I don't know. I'm looking for someone that can be an equal, someone that can, hold their own. I want someone that can
Right.
have a conversation beyond just the norm. And so that's probably a part of it. Like I said, and not saying that I don't, see women, wherever I am, about out and about at the store, and think she's attractive. I do
Right.
get those feelings. I just don't have a desire to pursue anything there,
Hmm.
and engage in sexual relations. Might be something I masturbate to later. And that's the other thing about it that threw me off with the asexuality initially, was because I'm like, well,
Hmm.
kind of sexual, because I started masturbating at 4. I've never stopped,
Right.
and I still do, and it's nearly a daily occurrence. So, um, how can I be asexual? But then I found out that there's areas there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And I think that's another thing. Like, people don't do their research. They just think, well, if you're asexual, then you just don't do anything. And that's not true at all.
right.
You know,
That was what my thought was initially, until I did a
demisexual and
little research.
asexual, yeah, they're like hand in hand. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things that I feel like people put so much shame on, that people are scared to research it. They're like, oh, well, if I research it and it fits me, then that's what I am. And then I'm labeled that. Like, it's not a bad thing. And you don't have to fucking label yourself if you don't want to. It's a category for your interest. So that's one reason why I really, really love being polyam. Obviously I don't choose it. I'm just that. But in those cases where I take mates that are asexual, I can still fit their needs, but then I have needs that need to be taken care of too. And then I have other partners that fits those needs. I kind of think of being polyam kind of like a buffet, right? I don't have to have only this one thing all the time and like get tired of it, or I can see people get offended by me saying that, like get tired of it. But in all reality, it's true, because with me, I'm always going. I have ADHD. My brain is always moving. I have a really high sex drive. Like, I have a lot going on. I'm very much into BDSM. I'm a very, very hypersexual person. And not everybody's like that, kind of like the needs that you and I have together. Like, we both really, really enjoy smothering. Obviously, you're still in training. We're still training, but you really, really enjoy the smothering. And that is one of my absolute favorites. Um, and I think I've talked to you guys a little bit about kind of where my smother fetish developed over the years. Have I told you about that, Thanatos?
You actually had spoke about it. We've spoken about it, and then you had mentioned it on a stream,
Oh, okay.
not
That's
all
what I
that long
thought.
ago. Yeah.
That's what I thought. So, anyone that hasn't listened, I had some crazy stuff happen to me whenever I was a kid. There was a boy in my class. I'll give you the shortened version. A boy in my class, I told him that I couldn't be friends with him because of the language he was handling. He was like talking about my body parts, like making it overly sexual and being like over the top aggressive to me and talking like really fucking filthy. Like, he sounded like an old fucking perverted man, and he was really young. This kid was like 7, right? So I tell him I can't be his friend anymore. He literally chokes me until I black out and almost die on the playground. No one saves me. I wake up and no one's around. He's gone. And I stumble my way to the office and have these like huge bruises already developing on my fucking neck. Anyway, my fetish kind of developed from that. And I didn't notice it until, many years later, because I was a fucking kid. I didn't know. But I knew that I like play at a very young age. And it didn't click until I was a teenager, kind of where it came from. So I started kind of dabbling with breath play on my own. And a lot of my fetish experience comes from me starting it on my own and then exposing other people to it later. So, Thanatos, I wanted to ask you kind of about that. Is there any kind of I guess fetish or attractions that you had that you tried to satisfy on your own and then branched out to have someone help you with it?
Not really. It's funny, you talk about the breath play. So prior to, kind of engaging with you, I'd done a lot of, I think, as you know, research and kind of been on the
Mm-hmm.
fringes of and different things. And so I was familiar with the concept of breath play. It
Right.
was not something that really necessarily had any great draw to me. It really wasn't something I was like, oh, I really want to try this.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I did, I loved it, right? I love the experience of all of that. So no, I mean, largely, I mean, my main, like I said, fetish is the smoking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I've always, obviously I have to have someone else to satisfy that,
Right.
now that's taken different forms. In younger days, when I was younger, a lot of people smoked. It was just out in the public. I could just satisfy it
Mm-hmm.
by
Just going,
wherever.
right. Just going
Yeah.
out.
And, that's changed. Obviously now it's largely, internet, and I have a variety of people I buy content from and talk to and have built, friendships with, really.
Right.
Um, but other than that, I mean, like I said, I have the attraction to the dominant women, and like I said, have looked at that for years, have considered it, and it just, I guess the timing had to be right. The timing had to be right, the right
Mm-hmm.
situation, and
You're super
that.
picky too. I'll just throw that out there.
Um, I Well, yeah, I mean, I waited for the best. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I kind of am. I kind of am. I'm kind of, I guess it was part fear, right? Fear of the
Right.
unknown. Um, and then, like I said, the right situation. I'm kind of glad. I mean, there's always the idea. Am I regretful because I was in my 50s when I started exploring it? But
Right.
the other side of it is, had I explored it earlier and had a bad experience, it may
Oh
not
yeah.
have been worked out. So I don't get too much into the whole, regret thing.
Ifs.
I just
Right.
try to roll with it as it is. So yeah, no, other than, like I said, very limitedly, some known about my smoking fetish and indulging it,
Mm-hmm.
that's really been it. When the woman that I had the relationship with, we actually were sexual. She kind of picked up a little bit on the submissive side, and we went to a
Mm-hmm.
sex shop, and she got a paddle, and we played a little bit with that, but it just, yeah, it wasn't really the thing. It didn't really. She was a great person. I mean, I really,
Yeah.
our relationship didn't work. Again, I feel like it was best to end it. I am the one that ended it, but a lot of great things came out of it.
Right. So that's kind of what I wanted to get back to. I know you were talking about you've only had like two real relationships that were in depth. So the first relationship, kind of what was there besides just like friendship? So like what attraction did you have? And did it ever get to potentially be sexual and just not get over the bump? Or what happened in that relationship?
Yeah, so that relationship was in the early 2000s. I met her. Um, I knew her, or I met her through her stepmom. Her stepmom worked for the same organization that I do, and we
Mm-hmm.
were we were both taking classes at a community college, and so that's how I knew her. And after I left that town and moved down to where I live now, I still communicate with her some, and she said, "Hey," one day she just threw it out. She said, "Hey, I don't know if you are involved with anybody or whatever, or you're looking or you're interested, but my stepdaughter is looking for would like to meet
Mm-hmm.
someone, and you guys are really close to each other. We lived like she literally lived just a couple miles from me,
Right.
with her sister and brother-in-law, and I don't know, maybe you guys want to meet, and if you say no, that's fine." And I was like, you know what, I thought, I would like to. I
Mm-hmm.
had only been living at my condo for a couple of years, like a year or so. And, I thought, maybe it'd be nice to have someone,
Right.
And so we met for dinner and we hit it off. We were pretty close in age. And I don't know, we hit it off, and we started dating, and I think she was looking for something and I was looking for something. And so and it was very comfortable, right? She was a
Right.
very she was looking for a husband, right? She was looking for a husband. I wasn't necessarily looking for a wife.
Right.
And ultimately, there was some physicalness to it. The physical is tough. Like, I don't hate it, right? Like, I don't mind. I kind of like the idea of laying on a couch with somebody, rubbing their feet,
Right.
the closeness of it. Not crazy on like the kissing and all the other. And,
Mhm.
we were making out one night and she was here, and it got close, and I couldn't. And then I kind of came clean about where I was. And then it kind of transitioned into this just comfortable platonic kind of relationship, you know?
Right.
And I don't know if she thought I would come around or not. Like, I kind of feel like she thought I would. I don't know, but I
Right.
knew that I wasn't, and I knew she wanted kids, and I'm like, I really don't really even want kids, so that's not really.
Mhm.
So again, that's where I ended that.
Incompatibility.
Yeah, I ended that, and that's where that came about. And then, like I said, it was literally probably close to about 10 years before I ever attempted
Mhm.
anything again.
So the relationship that you had with her and then the second relationship that you were in, what
Mhm.
kind of made the difference to make you feel like the sexual component was there?
Um, I don't know that it was necessarily that I was more attracted. I just think I was more ready to, I just wanted to try it, right? Like a bucket
Mhm.
list thing. Like, I don't want to die not trying
Right.
it, right?
Right.
And at that point, I'm in my 40s, so I'm like, well, if not now, then when? And she was very accommodating, so
Mhm.
I felt comfortable telling her, and coming clean about everything.
Right.
And she was, she was willing to, kind of work with that, I guess. So I think that was really the difference. It wasn't that necessarily more compatible. I mean, although we had compatibility, right? I mean, I had compatibility with the first girl and this lady here, so had some compatibility. But I also, also I guess, was more willing, and
Mhm.
I really wanted to try to attempt something. It was like it really was. We can go into a little more later, but I really was like, okay, it's now or never. I'm either going to do this or I'm
Mhm.
not, right?
Right.
And what kind of drove me there was, like I said, I joke, but it's kind of true. I live a hermit's life. Right? I'm I live a pretty solitary existence, and I frequented a restaurant, and there was a girl who worked there, and she was a waitress there, and had become friendly with her, and we talked, and so um, we hadn't talked for a while, and then kind of found out she was moving back to my town, and
Mhm.
she was separated from her husband, and so we started kind of hanging out, and there was a lot there. There's
Mhm.
just a lot there, right? And we didn't get involved in a relationship, but it made me realize maybe I wanted someone, right? Because
Right.
I went from having nothing to then we had a semblance of a relationship, a friendship, but it was very close. And then things changed there, and then I was kind of missing that, and then that's
Right.
when I attempted to, the whole dating, getting on the dating apps and everything, and I did that, and then
Oh
that's
my
where,
goodness.
yeah, I mean, and it wasn't maybe as bad as it's been, like, I guess as it is now. I think it's a lot worse now, right? So this was around 2014, and
Mhm.
so went on a couple dates. They were okay. Nothing came out of it. I was kind of really just about ready to throw in the towel. And I
Right.
met this lady, and we started talking. And there's a big car show up here in the summer, and we met up there at the car show. She liked that sort of thing too. So met up at the car show, hung out, and man, it took off from there. At that time, she had an 11-year-old, and I think her daughter was 13, maybe. something around there, 13, 14. And so they went to their dad's on like Tuesdays and Wednesdays and then every other weekend. So we started meeting up for dinner on like Tuesdays or Wednesdays. And then, that led to, sometime on the weekends when they were with their dad, and then it led to me staying over.
Mm-hmm.
And then it led to me just kind of being there, meeting them and being there kind of a lot of the time. So
yeah. So who initiated the sexual component?
oh, definitely her. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have initiated. I mean, there was
I see you
the
getting shy and bashful and turning a little red.
I probably. I mean, yeah, there was the kissing and the usual, and then she said, well, you could stay over, right? And so then that's the obvious, right? So then we gotta talk about that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I don't. To be honest with you, supposedly you'd think you'd remember everything about it, and I really don't. I don't remember exactly when it occurred. It was, I don't remember it was the traditional third date kind of thing. I think it was a little past that, but yeah, I don't exactly, but yeah, I mean, she
The third
definitely,
date thing is that something a lot of people actually go by?
it seems like a lot of people say they do. I don't know. But yeah.
I don't think I fit that in any relationship.
So yeah, but yeah, I mean, definitely she did, right? And I would say mostly, and like I said, we were close in age. We had a lot of, she was a great person,
Right.
and we had compatibility. I think, the reason I knew it was never going to work because sexually it was just never, there was just, well, it was never, right? That part was
Mm-hmm.
never going to be good.
So what made it not good?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, obviously, I mean,
I
it's
have to know
hard if
these
you,
juicy things.
right. Well, I mean, so okay. So here's the thing. First of all, um, realistically, like, look, she's 40-some-year-old woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say she's traditional. She started having sex in her mid-teens, even
Mm-hmm.
late teens. Say, well, and she's been married and has two kids, and here I come with no experience. So it's um,
You can't say
how
it's
much.
about effort because one, I know you put in a shit ton of effort, and two, you can't say it's because you don't know what you're doing because again, I know this not to be true.
Well,
Um
well, I will say my oral skills carried me through, right? It turned out that I had a talent. I had a hidden talent,
that you didn't even
and she
know
was that I didn't exactly I didn't even know about, and so she was willing to coach and say, I like this, I don't like that, that kind of thing.
about.
But oral wasn't enough, right? She wanted,
Right.
she wanted for one intercourse, and due to lack of experience and whatever, I mean, for me, the best thing that worked the best was, cowgirl style, her on top and
Mm-hmm.
ride. And I did love that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the rougher the better. Like when she would
Right.
get really rough, that's what I really liked. Like that's where
Right.
where we had the most like success, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because my thing is, so there's a couple issues, right? So one issue was me maintaining erection, and
Mm-hmm.
tried Viagra, tried all the things. I think it was more of as much mental as
Oh
anything.
yes. Oh yes.
And so here's the other problem with it. When someone has sex with someone, there's the physical aspect of it. And I think this is maybe especially true with women. They're looking for also a connection, right? It's about a
Mm-hmm.
connection to someone. And
Right.
for me, because of my fetishes, I sort of require that.
Right.
So if it's not there present in the moment, then it has to be present in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm somewhere else thinking about this, then it's,
Distracted.
there's this disconnection, and
Yeah.
that doesn't, she wanted to be able to kiss me and rub on me and have that create the reaction downstairs, and that just didn't work
Mm-hmm.
like that. So
Right.
I needed friction. I needed actual physical
So that
touching.
reminds me a lot with a lot of the studies, like even like whenever Pavlov was doing the study with the dogs, like you literally, your brain is trained to have certain things happen whenever you smell, hear, see, taste certain things. So that's essentially the same thing. Like you do that with smoking. Like whenever you get to see if you haven't heard his interview, you can go back and listen. It's very in-depth, very fucking amazing. But he describes kind of what he's attracted to in the cigarette itself, right? Well, I have something similar where leather is a huge thing for me, like fucking huge. Like I don't necessarily have to have it like Thanatos, but if it's there, I'm my mindset is better. Like if I can feel it, if I can smell it, if I can taste it, just like fucking rubbing up against. That's one reason I really, really love my riding crop, or even like my flogger or my leather corset or my leather boots. Like I always have some kind of leather around me because that helps with stimulation for me, right? So um I know you were talking about it kind of makes a disconnect. So if you weren't there kind of present and you were thinking about your fetishes, did it cause problems with you being able to stay erect?
It did. It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, we tried all the different things, and to varying success, because I don't think that was really the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we even tried one of those we had talked about, like the pills you get at the sex shop, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it worked to a point. It works to a point. I will say though, I did, like I said, I discovered that I had an oral skill.
Right.
I had skill in that department, but I also enjoyed that, right? Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what guy doesn't like a blowjob? I got to admit, you
Right.
know, can't say I didn't like that, because I did. It wasn't all. It was just there was just like frustration there, and like I said, I
Mm-hmm.
knew it was never going to be. And we even talked about this when you talked about like being poly, and if you have a mate that's asexual, that's fine, because you get one thing from them and you get something from someone else.
Right.
And she even, when we were towards the end of the relationship, she even talked about, I thought about that, but because her and her husband had tried swinging, and it was kind of the
Mm-hmm.
end of the marriage. It didn't really work because he wanted to do it and she didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So she was,
Uh
fairly
Also,
open-minded.
people do not need to put a band-aid on some kind of shit like that. If you have problems in your marriage, becoming a swinger or inviting a unicorn or doing anything with other people is not going to resolve the issues you have. You have to resolve those issues first before you experiment. Okay. He's not encouraging you to be like, oh, my relationship is shit, let me go ahead and invite someone else in. No, that's not how it
Right.
works.
And to be honest, at that point, I don't know that I was even open to something like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have been open to something like that. And now I might feel a little differently about it, but also too depends on the person, right?
Right. 100%.
So, um,
And I think there's still a big stigma that's like extremely negative on polyam people because um in my experience, people that aren't necessarily poly, they're just whores that like to just sleep with everybody. They tell everyone that they're polyam. And I don't whore shame. I'm okay with that. I mean, shit. Everybody has a fucking, well, I never had a whore phase, I guess. Everybody has a fucking whore phase. Most people do. I mean, obviously not the hermit or me, but
we're not good examples, but
yeah, we're not good examples. But most people do. And it's because you have these desires that need fulfilled. You want to experiment and everything. Well, I always make a joke. I was born 50 because I feel like I was born with this knowledge. I already kind of knew what I wanted in life. I already knew where I wanted to be and I knew how I was going to get there. And it just was a matter of me taking the time to get where I was going. And I feel that most people don't. Most people don't know that. So they experiment. Experimentation leads you to doing things that kind of can be promiscuous on some levels, right? I think the most promiscuous I ever was whenever I started doing adult entertainment, and that was just like digital, being promiscuous digitally, and because in person I wasn't ever an escort or anything. Like the extent of my in-person relationships was just me being a dominatrix. And um I feel like there are so many people that confuse people that are promiscuous and people that are polyam, that it gives polyam this judgmental kind of point of view from most people. They're like, oh, well, you're poly, that means you just go around and fuck everybody. No, it doesn't. Like polyam is about having meaningful connections, relationships, not let me go out here and find 10 different random people at the bar. Again, I'm not slut shaming at all. I love a good slut. But I think that it is so confused by so many people that they don't understand the difference. You know what I mean?
Well, I think polyam gets confused with the whole swinging thing, which is
Oh yeah.
different, which is
Oh
really
yeah.
different. But I do think it gets confused, particularly those that aren't involved and don't understand that.
Mm-hmm. I remember back whenever I first started, I was married many years ago, and my husband at the time, he was strictly mono, right? And he had cheated on me multiple times, and he didn't know I knew. I knew, obviously, but I didn't get jealous or offended like other people. Like my feelings got hurt because he did it behind my back. He didn't tell me about it. Like that's the breaking your trust is the part I have an issue with. Because if you want to do something, just fucking tell me about it, right? Well, he didn't. He ended up cheating on me. And then whenever we ended up getting married, after the marriage and everything, he realized that I was poly, that I was okay with being with other people. Like I had the desire for it. Like that's part of who I was. So he thought he would try being poly. It ended very, very badly. And I'm going to tell you why. He was an extremely jealous person. So he would go on dates with these other women. He would go to parties. There were parties that were set up with him and several women, or him and his friend and several women. And he would always get this, it's almost like buyer's remorse or buyer's guilt whenever he would be out on dates and stuff. So he would get it inside of him feeling like, oh, well, he's cheating because he's out with these other people, because again, he's mono and society standards, right? So he would get all upset about that. Well, after he ventured and tried to be poly, then I would, of course, be the one home taking care of the kids, doing all the shit that I need to do, work, whatever. So it ended up being so bad with his jealousy that he thought that I was cheating because he was out here dating and he didn't want me to date. I wasn't allowed to date anyone because he was too insecure. And it was like this ever revolving door of him thinking that I'm cheating because he's seeing other people and he feels guilt because he's seeing these other people. And I'm trying to explain to him that's not, I don't feel the same way about it you do, right? I don't feel the way you're feeling right now. It doesn't hit me like it hits you because we see things differently. But he didn't understand that. And then he tried to force me into a relationship with the female coworker of his. And he's like, well, if you don't want this relationship, then we're not going to have any relationship with anybody. And I'm like, there's nothing more toxic than someone trying to force you to be in a relationship you don't want to be in, for one, them trying to control the narrative of the entire relationship, and then them accusing you of cheating because, they're seeing other people and they feel this guilt and shame. So there's a lot of figuring yourself out. And some people try to force themselves to be poly and they're fucking not. Like, he's not good at being poly, like, because he's not poly. You know what I mean? Like, you can't force yourself to be that way.
Right. And I'll say this, something you bring up made me think another issue with the relationship, and ultimately where I decided to end it, was because they had this swinging thing, but yet at the same time there were supposed to be rules, right? And then of course he didn't.
Mhm.
He's telling some other woman that he loves her, and so essentially, she felt, she was cheated on, she felt betrayed, so she had a lack of
Mhm.
trust because of the things that he had done, which I
Right.
understood. But sometimes that would be projected in our relationship, and I told her multiple times, like, look, I'm
Mhm.
not perfect, but I'm not going to pay for what somebody else did.
Yeah,
um
for
and
sure.
would accuse me of things, and even one time she would
Mhm.
accuse me of, like, we were downtown at, there was like a Christmas thing, right? And we were down
Mhm.
there and we were walking, and she like accused me of looking weird at some guy, like I maybe wanted to be with some guy, and I'm like, I've never had any kind of tendencies like that. So I'm like, I don't even know what she was talking about. So
Yeah.
she she was, yeah, there's just a lot of insecurity. And then ultimately at the end of the day, also too, she wanted to be back with her ex, I felt. Now,
Right.
he would have never taken her back, I don't feel, so there was no danger of that. But I just, knowing that, right? Knowing
Yeah.
that just was an issue for me. And it was funny because she had dated a guy briefly before we got together, and then she broke up with him and told me all these things about him,
Mhm.
some personal and different things and things she didn't like. Well,
Incompatibilities,
a,
right?
a month and a half after we broke up, she was right back with him because she just couldn't stand to be alone.
Yeah.
And they are now married.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. See, that's my biggest thing. People take all of these insecurities, and instead of dealing with them and processing, get you a fucking therapist. Okay. Get a damn therapist. And if you're super heavy into kink, find a kink therapist, because they are out there. I mean, there's all kinds of therapists that you can get online now. You don't even have to go in person. So maybe you can't find somebody local. You can literally go online and you don't have to be worried about it, right? So a lot of people take these insecurities, they bring them into their relationships, and then they ruin perfectly good relationships because they're bringing past traumas in. And then on top of that, they always resort back to what's comfortable, right? And I'm not shaming anyone for that, because I know why you do it, okay? Even if you don't know why, I know why. So whenever you get comfortable in pain and abuse, that's kind of what you crave. It can be closely related to an attraction or to a fetish. Your brain feels like you need it. So kind of the controlled environments, that's what BDSM is all about. Like, if you guys don't know, anybody that's listening, if you don't know, BDSM is literally about a controlled therapy environment. There's something there that you need because of typically some past trauma or something that you didn't get to experience and you missed out on. Like, there's been sessions where people just want to be held. They don't want like any heavy BDSM, like they're not into pain. Literally, the only thing they want is mommy dom. They want you to hold them for hours, because some people don't get that. As kids, some people don't get the love that they need from their parents. And then they need that in a controlled environment so they can feel safe whenever they get older to deal with their issues. And that's perfectly fine. Like, nobody should have to feel guilty for that. You know who should fucking feel guilty for that? People that don't put a bigger importance on mental health, because I feel like mental health is one of the biggest issues that we face today, not just in BDSM, but like overall. Mental health is fucking huge and people ignore it, right?
yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. It's funny you say the something you never had an experience in BDSM. Um, I've never, not that I should have been or wanted to be necessarily as a kid, but I was never spanked. So
Mm-hmm.
I never really experienced it. And obviously I have now. Um, but yeah, so
Got some
that
rosy
is,
cheeks.
yeah, yeah. So yes, I think yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. And I think it, like I said, I know in my own case it was, hard. Like I said, I've said I don't think I really started fully accepting who I was until I was in my 40s.
Right. So that's the biggest reason why you were the 40-year-old virgin. You were completely self-sufficient. You really didn't need anyone else to be satisfied, and you were just kind of a bucket
Well,
list kind of moment.
yeah, it's funny because you say that, because that was one of the things in a relationship. One of the complaints, we were talking one time, and she said, I feel like you don't need me. Like, I feel like you don't really need me. And it's like, you
Check.
know, the truth in my mind was I don't, but to me, it was more of a compliment that I don't need you, but I want to be here, right? Like, I don't
Right.
need you to
Yes.
be here. Like, I'm
Fucking
completely
right.
self-sufficient. I don't need you, but I want to be here. I want you here. But I
Yeah.
think she wanted to feel more needed. And it was funny too, because she was
Mhm.
always like, if we lived together, because she always wanted me to move in, right?
Right.
And she's like, if we combine our income, we could do this, we could do that. And I'm thinking, well, I could do all those on my own. I don't need you for
Right.
that. So yeah, after that relationship, I kind of said, okay, look, this isn't going to work for me. I'm done. I wasn't trying for a while. And then
Right.
that happened. We broke up in February of 17.
Mm-hmm.
And then in like that fall, um, a smoking fetish model from my state, her and I started talking. And
Mm-hmm.
we briefly tried to date, and it just went very, very bad. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, that kind of made me think, well, maybe I do want somebody. So I got back on the dating sites, and and it just, yeah. And then I said, no, I'm done with this. And I just gave it up. But for the hermit life. But oddly enough, though, I remain friends, and actually I still communicate with that person on
Mm-hmm.
almost daily basis.
Right. So, um, I feel like one of my biggest issues with trying to be compatible with someone is the fact that people can't be honest with themselves. They try to force relationships out of insecurities, or out of kind of like your past relationship. She just wanted, she didn't necessarily care who it was. She just wanted someone to need and want her, not just want, but have to need her in some way. Like she needed some kind of validation from someone else. Have you seen that in a lot of your relationships too? Like not just your dating, but like friendships, like
Oh,
they need
absolutely.
validation.
Absolutely. I have a very, very close friend of mine who I just spoke with earlier this evening, and he will tell you, I cannot be alone. I
Mm-hmm.
can't be alone. I have to be with someone. And, the whole, there's a saying, 18 to 80, blind, cripple, or crazy. That epitomizes him. He does not
Mm-hmm.
care as long as they're willing, as long as they're there, as long as they're
Right.
available. He cannot stand to be alone, and he would rather be in a bad relationship than no relationship at all,
Yeah.
which is completely foreign to me, right? I
Yeah.
just
Right.
cannot understand that concept. And I had after my dad passed several years later, my mom married this other gentleman, and a great guy. And then we were talking, and he shared that he couldn't understand being alone, right? Because
Yeah.
um he went from living at his mother's to being with his first wife, and then ultimately getting with my mom.
Right.
And after she passed, he moved out of state, and he ended up remarrying again. He was somebody that
Yeah.
just, not a bad guy. He just wasn't used to that, right? He couldn't
Right.
handle that. And the friend of mine that I mentioned, I said, we tried dating. We're still very good friends. Very recently, she says, I never could understand the alone thing, but I get it now. It's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Some people, that's just, and she finally gets it. But and like I said, it's not the life for everybody, right? It
Right.
it can
Certainly.
be, solitary can be very troublesome. It comes with its own pitfalls. I think
Mm-hmm.
extremes are bad, and like I said, sometimes
Right.
it can be an extreme. And like I said, there's like the things that, like, in and of itself, masturbation is not bad, but it can be. It can be
Right.
a chronic thing, and I've been
Yes.
guilty of that. I've been guilty of that. All those things, right? I've
Right.
done all those. I've used techniques that are recommended to not use, which also
Mm-hmm.
probably also probably resulted in some of my erectile issues. Like I said, I prefer rough. So when I
Right.
first started masturbating as a child, I would do so by rubbing against the floor, the mattress,
Mm-hmm.
something hard. And, in that state, you're flaccid. And I did that into my 40s.
Right.
So there's some sensitivity loss there. So that probably affected that. So,
Right.
and so, I kind of got to the point where I'm like, look, I have my issues and I don't feel like I want to inflict them on somebody
Mm-hmm.
else.
Right.
Try to go through explaining all this. So, yeah, I just don't do that.
Well, I think when it comes to relationships, people don't talk enough beforehand. They pick a person and they're like, you're going to be my person and you're just going to tick all the boxes that I need you to tick, regardless of whether you do or not. I want you to, so you're going to. And that's where the incompatibility and the kind of settling, and then that causes people to have kind of remorse in the relationship, some pent up, frustration, anger, or sometimes even being petty. So I've noticed a lot with the older generation, like with my grandparents, even they didn't sleep in the same rooms after a certain age, right? It was like you had a roommate, not a mate. And actually, both sets of grandparents that I grew up knowing, besides my grandpa that died, obviously I didn't get to grow up knowing him, but both sets of them, they stopped having like the physical kinds of connections. Like I don't even remember seeing my grandparents hugging or kissing as a child. Like their sexual component was gone by the time I was born. And to me, that's extremely troublesome. Like I want to be 90 years old and I still want to be fucking. If you're not okay with fulfilling my needs at 90, then why are we together? It's different if it's like asexual kind of relationship. If we have something like platonic, that's different. Because we can still do like BDSM and we can still have a connection. You know what I mean? But like to not have anything at all. There's no wonder some of the older generations, they have this like pizza it's like pent up anger or frustration, or they just don't have an outlet. You know what I mean? They don't communicate at
Um,
all.
I think that's pretty common. And it's very funny you say that because do you know who the comedian Patton Oswalt is?
No.
I'm trying to think what he's been on. You'd know him if you saw him. He's been on a lot of TV shows,
Let me
but
look him up. Hold
uh,
on. It's
so he
Pat
did a
Oswald?
stand, Patton Oswalt,
Patton. Okay.
and he did a comedy special, and he talks about that very thing. He talks about getting older, and your dick doesn't work, and you get
Mm-hmm.
angry. And he said the previous generation that happened to them, and they elected Ronald Reagan president because they were so pissed off they elected an actor. And he goes, it just happened, they got so pissed off they elected a rowdy TV star and they made him president. He goes, I'm just going to tell you, younger generation, you're in trouble. When us Gen Xers get to that point, he goes, we're gonna put Janine Garofalo in as the president, and she'll refuse to run and she'll refuse to serve. He goes, that'll be the headlines on CNN, day 245, and the president still hasn't shown up yet.
Oh, oh my goodness. So like,
But I
if
mean,
it's that
I think
common, why
that's a
don't people fix it?
I think it is very common. I mean, as far as turning into that, I think it's probably extremely common, right? Like, I mean, I know people that don't, right? And they're older, but they're not necessarily, I mean, they're 50s, maybe in their 60s. And like I said, they have the separate bedrooms and they don't, that's just not a thing, right? It's not a thing. And I think it's
Like,
probably more common than uncommon.
and I don't mind somebody having a separate bedroom, but like there should still be some kind of physical something
They're
if
not
it's a physical relationship. You know what I
they're not
mean?
visiting each other from my
Yeah.
understanding. And
Yeah.
and it's funny because I've thought about that because I've thought, well, maybe when I'm in my 60s and that expectation is no longer there, maybe I would be with someone, and but
Well, you don't have to have that physical relationship where you're like all like super intimate hugging and kissing all the time. You can have other things, but what I'm saying is not just the physical touch, but the kind of things that go with that physical touch, like the open communication. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
the intimate moments where you're connected to that individual. So I'm not necessarily focusing on, oh, just the sexual aspect. I'm talking about the open communication where you feel like this person is a part of you, not, oh, it's just somebody I live with, you know?
Yeah, I will say in some of the relationships I know, I don't think they ever had that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there was secrets, right? There was always a
Right.
certain limit to communication and things. So
Mm-hmm.
that could be the aspect of it too. It probably depends on how good your connection is to begin with, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, I know a lot of places where, like you mentioned, settling. People just settle because, well, I don't want to be alone, right?
Yeah, they're fucking
So,
scared.
like I said, a lot of people can't handle the alone thing. They really can't.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really bother me. Like, I mean, if people are like, well, how can you go out to eat by yourself? I'm like, that doesn't bother me. Like,
Right.
none of that bothers me. Now, the only thing I won't do is if I go out to eat, if there's a line, I won't wait if I'm by myself. If I'm with
Right.
someone, they want to wait and it's not too long, okay, fine. But if I'm by myself, I won't wait. But other than that, it's fine. I don't, like I said, I go on vacation by myself. I do all sorts of things by
Mm-hmm.
myself. And it's not been a
Successfully.
problem. Successfully, yeah. I mean, you
Yes.
always meet people and you talk to them. I went to back in 2012. I always wanted to go to a Barrett Jackson car auction, and
Mm-hmm.
there was one in Vegas on my birthday weekend, and I'm like, perfect. I'm gonna go to Vegas for my birthday and go to the car auction. And I
Mm-hmm.
asked a couple of my car friends, they want to go, nobody could go, so I was like, all right. So I just went out on my own,
Yeah.
and I had a great time, to be honest.
Right.
So
So my next question for you is going to pertain to the physical aspect. So I know you kind of ticked off the bucket list, like
mhm.
you've had the sexual experience. Some of it was for you, some of it not so much. Is that something that you think you would pursue in the future, or are you okay with where you are now, just with experiencing what you have so far?
um, I'm okay where I am, but I mean,
Mhm.
I'm saying I'm not pursuing anyone, and I
Right.
don't have plans to pursue anyone. Um, so I might, given the opportunity, I mean, if something presented itself and it's possible, I'm not saying I wouldn't rule it out, right?
Right.
I guess I'm a never say never type person, right?
Right.
So I wouldn't say never, and I'm not saying I wouldn't be open to certain activities if the right person and the right opportunity came along. It's just
Right.
not something I'm actively pursuing, I guess, right?
Right. So it's kind of like the situation before, kind of like there's the interest there, but you have to find a compatibility mentally that makes you want to be involved like that.
Yes, absolutely, right. It has to be
See,
somebody
this is
at this
where it's
point.
so hard. You're so hard. You're you're like at this order of demi and asexual. Like you're right on the line.
Because I'm a conundrum. I'm a conundrum because for me the thing about it is I'm open, but they have to be worth it. To be
Yeah,
honest,
for
like
sure.
I think I finally have gotten to the point where um, I sort of accept my own self worth more so than I did in the
Right.
past, and
Yeah.
so it has to be worth it. There has to be. I'm not doing it just to please someone
Right.
unless it's a very special someone, right?
Right.
Then it's possible. But yeah, there has to be. It has to. It's not at this point. It's not checking off a bucket list, right?
Right.
Um, as we were preparing for this, I thought about. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, right? You had to have seen the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin, right?
Yes.
So nothing
Use
about
it
that
or you'll
scene.
lose it.
Yeah, I mean it's funny, right? It's a funny movie, right? It's a great movie. It's entertaining as hell. Now it plays upon the stereotypes, right? It
Mm-hmm.
plays upon the
Right.
stereotypes. So in the movie, Steve Carell, he's this man child because he hasn't had sex yet, right? He
Mm-hmm.
never matured because he didn't pass that rite of passage, so he's
Right.
not able to be a real man. And once he finally has sex, then he's suddenly this different person.
Yeah, like
like everything changes. Yeah, everything changes about him, and his job changes and all this other stuff. It's like that's not at all my experience, right? Like
Right.
I mean, I certainly have my insecurities, and I think I definitely had insecurities about that, right? Was I really a man because I hadn't had sex?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So, a lot of people do this like, oh, let me check in my V card.
Mm-hmm.
So after your V card was punched, like, how did you
It
feel?
it and that's the thing. It didn't remarkably change me. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
change who I was as a person. It didn't,
Right.
I didn't really feel that much different, right? It didn't. I mean, I don't regret doing it, and I don't regret the relationship, and I have no regrets. But as far as like, was it a life changing experience like in the movie? Absolutely not, right?
Right.
But I
Right.
also didn't live like a man child. You know, sex does not
Mm-hmm.
make you mature, right? There's plenty of
Right.
teenagers out
Oh,
there,
yeah.
people that have had sex and
And
had
adults,
kids,
even
yeah,
to
and
this
adults
day.
that have kids that are have had plenty of sex that are anything but mature. So
Yes.
sex and maturity, that's a stereotype, right? It
Yes.
doesn't go together at all. So like I said, I mean, it's an entertaining movie, but there's very little, I think, reality to it, and
Mm-hmm.
certainly no, it was not a it just wasn't a life change. I mean, it was in some ways. I think now I will say I think the relationship kind of changed me on a lot of levels and for the good. Like, I mean, she was a caring person, and she
Mm-hmm.
pushed me to make some changes that affected my health. Um, with some things, and so it was a good. It wasn't all bad. It was actually
Right.
mostly really good. It just was that after 2.5 years, we weren't going to go any further, right? It was
Right.
never going to be what she wanted. And one time, and I think she knew, because she even said one time, she's like, do you, just do this, or do you look forward to your time alone? And I was like, no, no, no. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of do, you know, and
Well, and there's
um,
nothing wrong with that. I
I
need
would,
time
I
to
would get
myself.
I would get Facebook memories. One of the things I like about Facebook, there's a lot I don't like, but one of the things I like about it is Facebook memories, right? And it'll show up,
Yeah.
you're doing this on this day. And a lot of times I'd be sitting there and we'd be doing whatever. And she did like to ride. So we did ride, and we did take a motorcycle vacation together and stuff. But, it'd come up and say, you were doing this, you were on this ride. And I'm thinking, that's still what I want to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I get that all the time to be like, hey, I left, where I posted, I left work early to go ride. And I'm like, I still do that. Right. So I
Right.
still,
Yeah.
get enjoyment from those sorts of things. So, yeah, it really wasn't that life altering. I mean, it was in some ways, but not like it's portrayed, right? It wasn't this
Mm-hmm.
like I think
I'm
people
gonna
think.
tell you, not everybody has the experience of punching their V card like everybody thinks. Like, it's not always this exciting thing that, is not just life changing, but like illuminating, like you're glowing after. Like, that's not how it happens. I can tell you the first time that I had consensual sex, I got accused of not being a virgin. It was terrible because here I am. Um, I had got finished and he's like, "Are you sure that you were a virgin?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, it's my body. I know what's going on." And he's like, "Well, I just feel like you were too good." And I'm like, "What does that even mean? Like, what does that even mean?" So here I am, like, insulted and like somebody doesn't fucking believe me. Like, why is that a thing? Why is it that the majority of people assume that you've already had sex with a shit ton of people? I'm going to say that before that experience, I didn't have an interest in being sexual because, kind of like you, I could do everything myself. I didn't need somebody else. Why would I want all of that baggage and people that don't know what they want and people that don't know how to do shit and people that just, they're exhausting. Why would I want that?
Well, and that's where I am now. Is that being in my, I'm kind of, so you kind of get set in your ways, right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
now it's like I just don't want somebody around all the time.
Yeah.
You
Oh my
know?
goodness. Oh my
Um,
goodness.
so yeah, that's, kind of where that is. But yeah, I mean, I'm not seeking, but I I'm a big believer in never say never,
Right.
because when you say never, that's probably exactly what you're gonna do. So I never say never. And the biggest thing I am at this point in my life is I'm open to opportunities in all
Mm-hmm.
aspects of my life, professional, personal. I'm up for experiences.
Yeah, for sure. So, whenever you did decide to pursue your past relationships, what kind of made you want to pursue them outside of, someone introducing you and asking, or um, convenience? What made you want to commit in that
It,
moment?
it was more, I think, wanting a connection to another person, right? It
Hmm.
was more about connection for me than it was, pursuing sex or,
Right,
any of the other things. I wanted connection to another person.
right.
That's what I was seeking. It was, loneliness and
Hmm.
wanting someone. That was really what it came down to.
Right. So, whenever it comes to kind of being more reclusive and being completely self-sufficient, what kind of I'm going to say like attributes do you think it takes in order for you to be successful in that kind of lifestyle? Like, of course, you have to have some kind of resilience, right? Because to be completely self-sufficient, you have to be resilient. But what other things?
Um, I think you have to be comfortable in your own head to a degree and be
Hmm.
comfortable with your own thoughts. A lot of people can't be alone with their thoughts.
Oh yeah.
The one friend that I said he can't be alone. I asked him. I was like, like the worst thing in the world. Like, can you imagine just being in a room, right, where it's just you and
Hmm.
there's no distraction. You don't have a cell phone. There's no television. There's no internet. There's no nothing. It's just you sitting and thinking. That terrifies him. That terrifies a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
That doesn't terrify me, right? It doesn't terrify me. In fact, I do that. There's times I sit here with nothing on and I just think, right,
Right.
about all sorts of things. And, very, within the last, like, just like a couple months ago, I told you, hey, I'm going to be offline all weekend, and I
Hmm.
shut my phone off on Friday at 4 o'clock and I didn't turn it on until about 9:30 Sunday night.
Yeah.
And that was great, I watched TV, I watched, YouTube, but I didn't, per se get on the internet other than that.
Right.
And it was great. So you got to be, you got to be okay with. So it's just like the people that live in these remote wilderness areas and stuff. That takes a different breed to be able to be alone like that,
Oh
to
yeah.
be able to stand that solitude. Um, I can't do that because I just can't rough it like that. But um, but I get that. I understand that. But at times, even for me, sometimes it has been overwhelming, right? Sometimes
Right.
there is just that need for human connection. And I know a lot of people suffered with that with COVID, right? Where there was isolation and different
Hmm.
things, and you couldn't go anywhere and you couldn't, for me, if
Yeah.
I'm here and I just really want to, I can go to a restaurant and sit at the bar. I always sit at the bar if I'm by myself because I feel like you get better service, and you almost inevitably end up
Hmm.
talking to somebody, right? So you have that. You didn't have that at that period of time, and that made that tough. So I've gone through periods where I've struggled with it. I can't say I never have, but for the most part, I've been okay with it. It's cuts a lot of the drama out, right? I don't have a lot of
Hmm.
drama in my life. And I've gotten to the
Cuts a
point where I don't
fucking
watch.
baggage.
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of mainstream media and news anymore either. And so it's funny, like the other day, I told you, all the stuff was going on about the Budweiser, and I'm like, what are people talking about? Like, I had no
Yeah.
clue, and I had to Google it, and then I pulled it up, and I saw,
Yeah, I did too.
um, so it's just, yeah. So I think, like I said, I think you have to be, kind of self-reliant. I mean, it's tough, like at times,
Hmm.
I mean, and I'm not like I don't have any friends, but I always feel like I'm posing if I ask somebody for something. Like I'm willing to
Hmm.
do anything for anybody. I'll be there in a drop of a hat, but I
Right.
don't like to ask. And so, like, I had, when I bought my new motorcycle, I dropped the old one off for service, drove the new one home. Well, I had to go pick the old one up from
Mm-hmm.
2020. I had to pick the other one up from service. So I asked a
Right.
friend, and he did, and it was fine. But, I don't think he cared. But to me, it was like a big deal to ask,
Right.
something like that. I have to
Certainly.
ask again. I have to do my other one for service. But, things like that, like, it makes it hard, right? Because you just don't, it's
Mm-hmm.
now, I mean, even if you're sick, you can get your groceries delivered. You can do,
Yeah.
it makes it fairly easy. So,
Well, if you're in an area that offers it, because let me tell
well,
you,
yeah.
on the farm, that would never be possible.
Well,
I would
yeah.
love that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I live in a close enough area, that we have most of the conveniences. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is, like I said, just being comfortable.
Mhm.
So few people are comfortable being
Oh, yeah.
alone with their thoughts.
And I feel like the biggest, well, one of the biggest is insecurities. They feel like they're just so insecure and they need validation. And those insecurities lead to more loneliness and them feeling like they're not adequate. So that is basically needing someone else to validate their worth. And at the end of the day, you have to learn your worth in order to love yourself properly, right? And a lot of people don't.
Yeah, it's funny, with being alone, and like I said, it's pretty well known I'm alone and stuff. People, the holidays, people, I'm like,
Mhm.
I appreciate it, but I don't want to participate in other people's holiday activities. I'm not much of a holiday person, and when when my mom was around, I absolutely went back, and if she still was, I absolutely would be back there with her.
Right.
But it's like I don't, people are like, but it's, my aunt, I know it bothers her a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Because, well, but you're alone at Christmas or whatever, and I'm
Right.
like, I'm alone every other day too. It doesn't. So why
Yeah.
is that different? It doesn't, like, this year I looked forward to Christmas because it was a long weekend, right? I was gonna
Yeah.
get, I got I got a long weekend. It was going to be cold. I stayed in. It was like I watched football. Like it's
Yeah.
wonderful, And people are like, but it's funny because I talk to people and they go, in the end, I'm really kind of jealous of you because I have to go to this and I have to do that, and you don't have to, and I actually am a little bit jealous of that. And
Well,
New Year's I got to spend it with you. So
yeah. And it's like, I feel like if most people would go to therapy, find their self-worth, start loving themselves, they would create these relationships that are much better. Like the relationship that you and I have, I don't keep shit from you, I communicate with you openly. It's not like I'm, oh, well, there's certain information I can't tell you because I need you to think that I'm this person. Like that to me is just fucking crazy that there are so many people that are like, well, I can't let this person know all of me because if they know all of me, then they're either going to lose interest or I'm not going to be as appealing or they're going to grow tired or something. Like, no, I want people to fucking know that I'm real. And if the compatibility isn't there, then the relationship shouldn't be to begin with. It shouldn't be this facade that I have to be like, let me continue to feed this because that gets exhausting and it doesn't last, right? I'm a lifetime motherfucking domina. I need commitment. And in order to do that, I have to have relationships that are real, not fake ones, real ones. Now, I'm fine with doing like, yeah, you want to buy my time? Cool. One time thing? Cool. But ultimately, the people that I invest in, I need them to be there consistently because I feel like the compatibility grows with time. Like the biggest example I have with you is our first session and then our last session. So, what's the differences that you noticed with our first and the last one that we had recently?
Well, the first, of course, was my first session ever, right? So I went
Mhm.
into it with no expectations. I was just thinking about that today. Funny enough, when I was walking, because I gave you a little bit, but I didn't give you a whole lot to work with, right? Because I didn't
Right.
really know, right? But I felt like the session was good, right? So I felt like you kind of took more of a risk going into that session than me because you're out there and exposed on the internet. So if you weren't who you said you were, somewhere along the line, somebody's gonna, you know what I mean? There's gonna be call outs and stuff. And so,
Yeah.
and I had been around for long enough and watching that I felt like you were the genuine article, but you didn't know me. You'd never, you know, you hoped maybe, but you didn't know. So I felt like it was a good session. I felt like we had a pretty good connection, but to be honest, each session has gotten better. So, you know, I felt like I enjoyed it the first time. And again, back to bucket list, it was a bucket list thing for me. I didn't know if I would continue. I
Right.
didn't know. I did not know how I would feel after it. After it was over, I knew I would definitely do it again. And so, you know, the second session was better than the first, a lot
Right.
better. The third session was way beyond, and then this last one was, of course, was better still. Like I feel like they get better and better, and because we learn each other more, and you certainly learn more about me, and
Yes.
I think it makes a huge difference. I mean, again, to get my name in the third, to be named by my third session was a pretty big deal to me.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've never done that ever. I'll have you know. First, this is one of those first time for everything kind of situations.
Yeah. So, you know, we started, we had off and on communications, and I had told you back in May of last year when you were coming to Cincinnati, I was considering it,
Mhm.
and I got cold feet and I didn't do it. And so then, you know, in when you said you were coming up in August, I was like, okay, this is it, you know. And so we started making plans, and you know, did the application and did the whole process. And so,
Mhm.
you know, from July on, we had pretty regular communications, and I think since about August, we've had daily communications. There hasn't been a day
Yep.
where we have not communicated. Um, and I know that consistency is important to you, and it is to me as well. It is
Right.
very important to me as well. And I feel like in a relatively short period of time, we've gotten to know each other very well, and there's been a good connection. And again, it speaks to communication, right?
Yes. And you know, that's one of my biggest pet peeves about submission. Like I'm all for these people that want to do just online stuff. If that's what you want, I'm all for it. I will cater to that. I will be your fetish dispenser. But don't expect me to be that all the time. And don't expect to get a real life, like completely engulfed situation online because it's not going to happen. So a lot of these people, they're like, oh well, you're my queen, you're my mistress, I completely submit to you, and then they try to dom from the bottom. Oh well, tell me to do this, make me do this. And then it's like, do you know how this works?
Well, that's the problem, is that's how it does work with a lot of the Instadoms on Twitter, right? And so they're
Yeah.
used to that. They're not used to the real experience. And so that's, I think, the biggest difference, like we've talked about,
Yeah.
when I first started talking to you on Twitch, I didn't address you as any title. I would just say hi,
Hmm.
and you just spoke to me by my last name. We just had casual conversation, and it was
Right.
nothing. And then once I got to know you and got to know more about you, and then approached, and it's grown from there. Now, of course, I
Mhm.
use queen because you are my queen, right?
Yes. But I feel like if that's what you want, like if these random people on the internet, or even if they want to do like one session in real life and they want to be like, oh, I want to pour my heart and soul into you just for this one time, cool. I'm cool with that. Completely okay with that because I understand one, serving in real life is a luxury. Not everyone's going to be able to afford it. And I understand that. I also understand that there are people that want those connections that just it's beyond their means, and that's cool too. You can literally look at the DOMs online, and there's a lot of free content out there. I'm going to tell you, Pornhub or free pages, teaser pages, they have amazing content for you. But that's whenever it comes to you trying to force someone to be your fetish dispenser and you're coming to their place of work to do that, That should never be something that you're like, oh yeah, let me see how much time I can milk out of this person. I know I can't afford their time, but because whenever you're purchasing that time, you're not purchasing just that moment. You're purchasing the years of experience they had to build up to that moment. So that's why I kind of thought it was ironic that whenever you had your first session, it was literally you didn't go to the beginning to the amateurs. You were just like, nope, here I am. I want the best. Let's go for it. And I'm just like, so have you ever had any sessions before? And you're like, nope. And I'm
I
like,
hadn't.
yeah,
I
okay.
had never done an online. I'd never done it. For me, like I told you, for me, if I was ever going to be able to submit, it had to be the right person. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't just do a persona online or
Right.
something. It had to be this certain experience. I'd done plenty of research. I'd looked at a lot of websites. I had considered
Mm-hmm.
certain situations. Um, I knew some things. I didn't know a lot. There's still a lot I don't know, but I knew more than maybe a lot of people.
Oh
And
yeah.
I knew what I was after.
You're
And
also
so,
very perceptive. Not everyone is. They buy into things and see what they want to see instead of seeing the realness. So I think that's where there's a lot of miscommunication too.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so no, so I knew, like I said, now I didn't know if it would be something I would enjoy to the point where I would want to do it again. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew it was what I wanted to do. And then once I
Sure.
left, I knew I'll be back.
Yeah.
And and I was, but yeah, I mean, no, I didn't. Like I said, I wanted to see the real thing, and like I said, that was a lot of why I approached you, because of you share enough of yourself with where people see you, then they see you who
Right.
you are, and they see you're a real person. You're not just this, I don't know, this character Dom. There's so much of that. There's so much of
Yeah.
that. And again, some people want that, I guess. Just like the people that think that you wear a latex cat suit to go
Oh
to a
my
PTA
goodness.
meeting or something, right? But um,
That's
I
exhausting.
right. So, for me, like I don't, and I guess, you're saying about I want this, I want that. That's a fetish thing, and that's fine if that's what you negotiate.
Yeah.
But, that's not true submission, right? I've
Yes.
never asked you to wear anything in a session, because my feeling is you're the dominant. I want you to be comfortable. So whatever you choose to wear is fine with me.
Yeah. And like the only time that I'm like, I can accommodate you for a certain thing is if it is some kind of therapy that they need enacted to kind of help them because like I said, I've been providing therapy for a long fucking time. And I fully believe that BDSM can heal, it can help you cope, it can do so many wonderful things. But not everyone knows about aftercare. Not everyone practices the way they should. And a lot of people end up hurt because they don't practice appropriately. Like back before I got active in scenes, there's still a huge stigma today where they confuse abuse and BDSM. And those are two completely different fucking things. Um, the biggest thing I remember seeing a while back was the 50 Shades of Grey, years ago when 50 Shades of Grey came out. And everybody's like, oh, that's so kinky. That's, like gives you the full BDSM experience. No, it does not. I didn't beat you and leave you on the floor, did I?
No, but the other thing too is, um, a lot of that is, you mentioned that, and I know others, that, are friends that, they've had experiences. And I think a lot of quote unquote dominants are just abusive people that hide behind the idea that they're dominant, right?
Yes.
Um,
They just
and
want to be shitty and have a reason to be.
right, and a lot of the insta doms on Twitter don't get it. They think that being a dom is being a bitch, and
Yeah.
it's about being bitchy and being, and it's like,
Yeah.
while dominant is an attitude, in my mind, dominance comes from a place of confidence. So if you're not confident, you cannot be dominant.
And to be a good dominant, you have to know how to take care of your submissive. If you think that you can just do whatever the fuck you want and treat them however the fuck and not pay attention to their needs and making sure that you're taking care of their mental and physical health, then you don't need to fucking be there because you're not a true dominant. You're just a fucking asshole. And I will fucking die on that hill. Abuse is not dominance, it is not submission, it is fucking abuse. And I feel like that's something that not enough people know about because they're kind of scared to talk about it, you know?
Yeah, I think it happens, and a lot of times, like say, some of these quote unquote dominants are very insecure, and they
Mm-hmm.
act in ways, and like I said, are not. I just know examples, and so I think for you, it's you were lifestyle before you're pro, and now you're pro, but you're also somewhat of a lifestyle. So it's all ties in together. So it's who you are. Like I said, if you stop doing this professionally for some reason in the future, you would still be a part of your life.
Oh, yes.
Um, Others are just in it for the financial aspect of it, and that
Yeah.
shows.
Which is a lonely fucking place, especially on those dry spells. Because let me tell you, like anything else, whenever you work for yourself, you're going to have high points, you're going to have low points, and you're going to have those medium points. And I'm going to tell you, those low points are going to make you question yourself, especially in the beginning, especially somebody that's already fucking insecure, you know, because you're basically a contractor, you're an entrepreneur, you work for yourself as a pro dom.
Well,
So,
and every time well, other than the time when I came down to you, the times you've come up, you've had sessions and you've had people cancel, right? They get cold
yeah,
feet and they cancel like every single time that's
yeah,
happened.
yeah.
Um,
I want to tell you, I made a trip all the way out to fucking um Fort Wayne. I had 3 sessions set up. Only one showed up. Like it's exhausting. Because they talk this big game and it's like all about the fantasy for them, and then whenever they go to do the in person, it is so fucking hard for them. And I mean, they've already paid their money, right? They've already deposited, they've like, I'm not going on this trip without making sure that it's fucking taken care of, because why am I going to spend my money to go invest on this and me not make something out of it? So, I mean, these people fucking, they pay up front and they just don't show up. Like, you've already paid.
yeah, we
Like,
had that conversation. Like I said, in May, I considered it. We even kind of talked a little bit, but there was no kind of commitment, and then I just
mm-hmm.
kind of let it go, and then I
Yeah,
kind of regretted it. So when the other opportunity came around, I was like, but once I was committed and I said I'm doing it, then I'm doing it, right? There's no
right.
backing out of it. I was not gonna. Yeah, I wasn't backing out. I was definitely going through, and it was a great decision. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So that leads me to the last question that I have for you today. I want to know the difference in your thought process for committing to your first sexual experience whenever you were around 40, and then committing to your first session with a pro dom.
Um, I guess in some ways they were the same, right? And that I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to experience it. Um, I guess that the difference, when I committed to that, to trying sex, and I did, and it wasn't like we just did it one time, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
there was good and there was bad, but it wasn't. I guess, like I said, it wasn't a life changing experience for me. It wasn't something
Right.
like I need this in my life. Always, like, I got the appeal. I'm not saying I didn't get some of the appeal, but it
Right.
wasn't something. By the same token, um, that was a little bit of a life changing experience. I mean, I felt very energized. I didn't know how I
Mm-hmm.
would feel after the session,
Oh my
and
goodness, you
I
were so
felt.
fucking lit up and bubbly. Like, and that's what I
uh,
love. Like, whenever
I
there's glowing.
yeah, I mean, I had a lot of energy afterwards. Uh, I wasn't sure. I mean, I didn't know how, and so I had a lot of energy afterwards. I just felt really energized. I always feel very energized after a session. I stayed at that hotel, which I wish I just drove home that night. But I didn't know how I was going to feel, and it was after my long motorcycle trip, and so
Right.
that's why I booked the room. The next time I drove home, and it was perfectly fine. The last couple of times I drove home, it was perfectly fine because I was, like I said, I was buzzing with energy,
Right.
and so I feel a lot. I feel energized. I feel focused. So it was the difference of the experience. The approach was the same in that I want to experience this. I want to experience this in my lifetime. I don't want my life to go by and not experience this.
Right.
But how it felt changed how I responded to it, and so that was something like, I don't necessarily need this as a part of my life. This isn't really who I am. But this other was like, I want this as a part of my life. This
Yeah.
is, this is a type of relationship that works for me,
Right.
on a lot of levels. So I think that's the difference. The difference was how I felt about it, and
Right.
so yeah.
I love it.
One thing I wanted to say, reference, because so many hear this and everybody has their thoughts and opinions. But three things when you hear somebody maybe not experiencing sex till later on, there's three things I think that may come to someone's mind. They might come to mind in my mind even. And first is that this person was raised in a very strictly fundamental religious household, and not the case at all. We didn't even go to church, so there was no strict religious code that I was raised by. Certainly there was moral code, but just not any
Right.
particular religious code. And the next might be that it was an especially cold household. There was no affection, and that absolutely was not the case. My parents were openly affectionate with one another. They were openly affectionate with me, hugs, kisses, the whole bit. So there was none of that.
Right.
It wasn't like a no touching type situation. I mean, it was very, very loving environment.
Right.
And then, lastly, somebody may, you touched about your experience, sexual abuse. And I have not suffered, fortunately, any sexual abuse. So none of those things were the case in my instance. It was just more the fetish and just kind of how I'm wired, I think.
Well, the craziest thing, I guess, that a lot of people don't understand is I look at it like a Pandora's box theory, right? So if you have all of this stuff in a box and you're not allowed to see it as a kid, you don't know what's in there. So of course, as a child, you're like, what's in the fucking box? I want to see what's in the box. I don't care what I have to do. I want to know what's in that box, right? It's like the whole curiosity killed a cat. Well, a lot of religious households end up kind of pushing their teens into being sexual because they're kind of hiding it from them, right? So I was in a very religious household, which seems fucking crazy.
But that's what they always say. The preacher's kids are always the wildest.
Yeah. And my dad, he wasn't a preacher whenever I was little. Actually, he was the opposite of a preacher. But later on, whenever I was 18, he became a preacher when I was 18. But my mom was always in church, heavily in church, like the majority of her life since she was 14 years old. Before that, she was just kind of in and out. But at 14, she was heavily in church, and she was in and out, different denominations. But she was always extremely religious. And my dad was kind of on the outside of that. Like, he never committed himself to any religion, but he supported my mom in being religious. And then at 18, that's whenever I was 18, that's whenever he became a preacher, and he devoted his life to God, and was extremely religious going forward. Like today, he's extremely religious. He's still a preacher. But it's one of those things, like, open education, awareness, and just acceptance helps people get a lot farther than trying to hide something from them, right? I feel like it does in my
Yeah,
experience.
I agree. I think absolutely right. The thing you don't know about, that's the thing you most want to do about, right? It's like
Yeah.
if you have something, have kind of surgery or something, like you can't itch that area. What do you want to do? You want to itch that area, right? That's all you want to do. It's all you can think about. So I think it's the same way, right? So it's like, just like some people, if you tell someone you can't do something, well, I wasn't even thinking about the one, but now I want to do it just because you told me I can't.
I said the same damn thing, especially whenever it came to like the COVID nonsense, because there were plenty of people that literally hated going out in public. They didn't want to be out in public. But as soon as they were told you need to stay home, they're like, you can't fucking tell me what to do. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna party. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, when they announced the curfew here, they're like, I don't know, it was like 10 or 10:30. I'm like, I never why would I be out at that late hour anyway? For God's sakes, I'm not going out anywhere at that time of night, I mean,
oh. But there are people that were like, oh, what is the curfew? Well, I have these things to do after the curfew starts, so
yeah.
that's not gonna work for me.
Well, although the curfew was the dumbest thing ever, right? It made no
Yeah.
sense to me at all that what it's going to spread more between 10 at night and 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
That's when nobody's out. You should make it from 10 in the morning till 6 at night. It doesn't make any sense, but little of that did. I think you weren't supposed to question, you were just supposed to comply. So that was more what it was about, but that's a whole nother thing. But
Yep.
yeah, like I said, I do think, hiding it, you do no favors. I've watched kids that were raised sheltered and it did not do them any favors.
Yeah. It literally created harm in some form. That's like I was never educated really by my parents about anything sexual, which is why I was left under, I guess, situations, and I ended up being hurt because I mean some of those things could have been avoided if I knew what they were. I mean, I will all day talk about how educating your kids is the best way to prevent that kind of fucking shit happening to them. Because I mean, I didn't know what the fuck was happening. I had some really weird shit happen to me as a kid. And had I known what it was, I would have been a little more prepared and been able to, cater to that a little more to my safety. But there are plenty of people out there just like me that were just completely sheltered, and the parents thought they were doing them a favor, and they weren't. They were actually hurting and hindering them. So I will forever preach education is the best way, 100%, because to me it is. Power comes from knowledge, right? I feel like.
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that knowledge is power, which is, if you look at, on the subject of religion, a lot of religions are against education because they understand that people won't comply and they won't follow the rules if they're know more. So yeah, I'm very much a knowledge is power type person.
This has been a very enlightening. I don't even know how long we've been talking for a long time.
a very, very long time. But like I said, it was a great conversation, as it always is with you. So, I've enjoyed it. I'm very, very thankful you had me back.
I'm glad I had you back too. I rather enjoy picking your brain.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming to join us for another episode of Forbidden Depths. And we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in the next one. If you have any questions, just leave them for us. You guys have an amazing day. Hey, it's Queen Frostbitten again, your host. I just want to remind you that you can follow us on YouTube at Forbidden Depths. That's FORBIDDENDEPTHS. Or over on Twitter at the number 4 BIDDENDPODCAST. Remember to always stay educated, consensual, and safe. We'll see you on the next show.